At a family reunion, my granddaughter Rosanna looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're not even my real grandmother. You're no longer part of this family." I simply nodded and sipped my coffee. The next day, when she tried to check her bank accounts, every one of them was empty. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. When I came back from my business trip, the doorman stepped in front of me, blocking my way into the building. Without meeting my eyes, he handed me a folded note. It was from my granddaughter. "You are no longer part of the family. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached." My hand trembled as I read those words again and again, as though the meaning might change if I stared long enough. I lifted my gaze to Rodrigo, our building's doorman for the past 15 years, searching his face for some kind of explanation, some clue, anything that would tell me this was just a terrible misunderstanding. "Ms. Nomi, I'm so sorry," he said, voice low, eyes darting away from mine. "Rosanna asked me to give this to you when you got back." I gripped the handle of my suitcase harder, feeling a sudden unsteadiness in my knees. After 30 years in this building, after raising my granddaughter here from the time she was 7, I was being turned away like a stranger. Did she say anything else? My own voice startled me. It sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. Rodrigo shook his head, his discomfort written all over his face. "She just left this note yesterday and said you would understand." But I didn't. I couldn't. Just 2 weeks ago, before I'd left for the annual business conference in Chicago, everything had been fine, or at least I'd thought so. Rosanna had even helped me pack, sitting cross-legged on my bed like she used to as a child, pointing out which outfits would look most professional on me. "Is she upstairs now?" I asked, my throat tightening. "No, ma'am. Haven't seen her today." I nodded, fighting to keep my composure. At 67, I had weathered storms, my husband's early death, my daughter's fatal car accident that left Rosanna motherless, the years of building a business from nothing while raising a grieving child. But this cut straight through me in a way nothing ever had. "I'll just go up then," I said, reaching into my bag for my keys. Rodrigo shifted uncomfortably. "Miss Nomi, I think the locks have been changed." The lobby suddenly felt too bright, too exposed. From the mail area, I could sense curious eyes turning toward me. Mrs. Nomi Fisher, always composed, always in control, now standing frozen, locked out of her own home. "I see," was all I could manage. Memories came rushing in without my permission. Rosanna at 8, crawling into my bed after nightmares about the accident. At 12, winning the science fair with my guidance. At 16, rolling her eyes at my outdated advice but still quietly asking for it. At 22, moving back in after college because it just made sense financially, Gran. When had it changed? When had my sweet girl become someone who could write those cold, surgical words? "You are no longer part of the family?" "Is there someone I can call for you?" Rodrigo asked gently. I shook my head. Who would I call? My friends were mostly business contacts. My sister lived across the country. Rosanna was my only real family. "I'll get a hotel room," I said, forcing my shoulders to straighten. "Could you call me a taxi, please?" As I waited on the sidewalk, I scrolled through my phone, looking for clues in our recent messages. Nothing stood out. The last text from her was 4 days ago. "Have a great final day at the conference, Gran. Safe travels home." A taxi pulled up. I slid inside, giving the driver the address of a nearby hotel. As we pulled away, I glanced up at the 12th floor. My floor, and thought I saw a figure at the window. Was it Rosanna or Thomas, her boyfriend, the one I'd never entirely trusted? The hotel room was impersonal but clean. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my travel clothes, and tried calling Rosanna, straight to voicemail. I sent a text. "I'm back in town. Got your note. We need to talk, please." No answer. It wasn't until nearly midnight that my phone buzzed. A text from her. "There's nothing to discuss. The locks have been changed. Your things are being packed. You can arrange to collect them next week." My things. As though 30 years of my life could be so neatly boxed and pushed aside. I called her immediately, and to my surprise, she picked up. "Rosanna, what's happening? Why are you doing this?" Her voice was cold, unrecognizable. You know why, Gran? Or should I even call you that? You're not really my grandmother, are you? Just my mother's stepmother. We're not even blood. The words hit like physical blows. It was true I'd married her grandfather when her mother was already 10, but I'd raised her mother as my own, and when tragedy struck, I'd done the same for Rosanna. Blood doesn't make a family, Rosanna. Love does. Care does. 30-year. Save it, she cut in sharply. I know the truth now about every... Thomas helped me see clearly. Thomas. Of course. What truth? Rosanna, talk to me. Check the front desk tomorrow. I'll leave a box with your essential items. Then the line went dead. I sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to silence. Sleep never came. Around 3 in the morning, I wandered down to the hotel's empty lobby. I asked the night clerk for a sheet of paper and a pen and began writing down everything I could remember about the past few. I had spent months chasing scraps of information, searching desperately for anything that might explain how this had all begun. By the time dawn broke, my notebook was thick with pages of half-formed theories and scribbled connections. Yet I was no closer to understanding. The only constant, the only fixed point in the tangled mess was this. Thomas had appeared in Rosanna's life exactly 6 months ago. Thomas, the man with the smooth voice and the probing eyes, who never failed to ask detailed questions about my business, my investments, my properties. The questions had seemed harmless at first, almost polite, but now I saw them for what they were. At 9 o'clock that morning, I returned to my building, hoping to catch Rodrigo before anyone else came around. He was standing near the lobby, and when he saw me, his shoulders eased. Ms. Nomi, he said quickly. I'm so sorry about yesterday. This isn't your fault, Rodrigo, I told him. But I need to know, have you noticed anything unusual lately? Anyone coming or going from my apartment? He hesitated. His eyes darted toward the elevator, as if checking who might overhear. Then reluctantly, he nodded. Movers, yesterday, and the day before. Big trucks. My breath caught. My voice came out low, sharp. Movers taking what? Everything, he said quietly. Furniture, paintings, boxes, everything. The blood drained from my face. When I reached my door, Rodrigo slipped me the master key, something he clearly wasn't supposed to do. 15 minutes, he whispered urgently, glancing down the hall. Before they come back. I stepped inside and froze. The place was hollow. The walls seemed to echo, stripped bare of the life they had once contained. The antique dining table where Rosanna had sat doing her homework, it was gone. The blue velvet sofa where we had curled up to watch movies together, gone. The curio cabinet, filled with delicate treasures I had collected over decades, gone. I moved through the apartment like a ghost wandering its own grave. Pale rectangles on the walls marked where photographs and paintings had hung, their absence more haunting than the blank plaster itself. In the kitchen, the copper pots that had belonged to my mother had vanished. The bedroom was worse. The mattress sat exposed, lonely, as if even it expected to be taken next. My dresser, my vanity, my armoire, gone. And with them, generations of jewelry. My wedding ring, the pearl necklace I had been saving for Rosanna's 30th birthday. The weight of it all pressed me down until I sank to the floor. This was not just theft. This was erasure. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from an unknown number. You shouldn't be there. Leave now or we'll call the police. Thomas. It had to be him. I ignored it, forcing my trembling legs to carry me into Rosanna's room. To my surprise, her room was untouched. Eerily so. The stuffed animals from her childhood still lined the window seat. The photo collage of her college years still hung above her desk. And then I saw it. A manila folder lay on the bed, as if placed there deliberately. Inside were documents I had never laid eyes on. A deed transfer for my apartment, showing what looked like my signature, giving full ownership to Rosanna. Bank statements revealing large withdrawals I had never made. A power of attorney document, supposedly signed by me, granting Rosanna complete control over my assets. The handwriting mimicked mine almost perfectly, but not quite. I see you found them, a voice said behind me. I turned sharply. Rosanna stood in the doorway. Behind her, Thomas lingered, tall, polished, handsome in that unnervingly calculated way that had always made me uneasy. His hand rested firmly on her shoulder, possessive. "What have you done?" I asked, my voice so quiet it was almost lost in the air. Rosanna stepped forward. There was something in her face now, hardness, an age beyond her 27 years. "Nothing that wasn't already coming to me," she said. "By forging my signature, by stealing everything I own?" Thomas chuckled softly, the sound almost intimate in its cruelty. "Stealing is such an ugly word. We prefer accelerated inheritance." I looked at Rosanna, searching for some flicker of the girl I had raised. "Wait, I would have given you anything you asked for. I was already planning to leave everything to you." For the briefest moment, something wavered in her eyes, doubt, maybe even regret. But Thomas's fingers pressed into her shoulder, and the flicker disappeared. "We didn't want to wait," she said evenly. "You've lived your life already. Now it's our turn." "Your turn," I repeated hollowly. "And what about me? Where am I supposed to go?" Thomas shrugged, casual and cold. "You're resourceful. You've always been good at landing on your feet." The cruelty in his voice stunned me more than I expected. "Rosanna," I said, ignoring him, "think about what you're doing. This isn't you." "You don't know me," she snapped. "You never did. You were too busy with your precious business, always trying to prove something to people who didn't even care." She swept her arm toward the stripped walls. "All this, everything you collected, it was just to show everyone how successful you were." Her words cut deep because they held a sliver of truth. After my husband died, I had thrown myself into work, building a consulting business that flourished over the years. Maybe I had missed things. Maybe I had been too focused on providing for her financially rather than emotionally. But this version of our life, the cold, resentful rewriting, was not the truth I remembered. I remembered the school plays where I'd taken time off to sit in the front row, the vacations we'd taken, the nights we'd stand up late talking about our dreams. "I made mistakes," I admitted quietly, "but nothing that justifies this." Thomas glanced at his watch, his voice curt. "We don't have time for this. The movers will be back in an hour." I straightened my back, summoning a strength I hadn't realized was still buried somewhere inside me. "I'm calling the police," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Thomas's lips curved into a smile, cold, calculated, and completely devoid of warmth. "With what evidence?" he asked. "Your signature is on everything. Legally, the apartment belongs to Rosanna now. The furniture, too. She could say it was hers all along or claim you gave it to her. It's your word against ours. And tell me, who do you think they'll believe?" Rosanna's voice slid in like a blade between my ribs. "A confused old woman," she said lightly. "Or the granddaughter who's been caring for her?" Caring for me. The absurdity of it might have made me laugh if my chest hadn't been so tight. If the truth of the moment weren't pressing down on me like a stone. "You need to leave," Thomas said, taking a threatening step closer. I looked at Rosanna one last time, searching her face for a flicker of hesitation, for the girl I'd raised. "Is this really what you want?" She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Just go, Gran." I bent down, gathering the folders stuffed with forged documents, holding it tight to my chest as if it were the last piece of myself I had left. "I'll go," I told them, "but this isn't over." As I tried to walk past, Thomas's hand shot out, clamping around my arm so hard his fingers bit into my skin. "Leave the folder," he ordered. "No." I locked eyes with him, refusing to look away. "You can take my home, my possessions, even my granddaughter. But not this. This stays with me." For the moment, I thought he might rip it from me by force. But then Rosanna touched his arm. "Let her go. It doesn't matter now." In the elevator, I sagged against the wall, suddenly aware of my heartbeat hammering in my ears. The truth washed over me in sickening waves. My home was gone. Most of my belongings gone. And worst of all, the child I had loved and raised had betrayed me in a way I could never have imagined. When the elevator doors opened, Rodrigo was waiting in the lobby, his face tight with worry. "Miss Nomi, are you all right?" I wasn't. I knew I would never truly be all right again. But I nodded anyway. "Where will you go?" he asked. It was the question I'd been avoiding. If Thomas and Rosanna had gone this far, then my bank accounts were probably compromised too. My business contacts were out of town. My friends, well, I'd let most of those relationships wither over the years, pouring my energy into my work and into Rosanna. I don't know, I admitted. Rodrigo hesitated, then said quietly, my sister has a small apartment she rents out. Nothing fancy, not what you're used to, but it's clean, and it's in a decent neighborhood. I stared at him, startled. This man had been a constant background presence in my life for 15 years. An exchanged nod in the mornings, a Christmas envelope, a few minutes of polite conversation about the weather. And yet here he was offering me help when the person closest to me had just turned her back. Thank you, I said, my voice catching. I would appreciate that very much. As we stepped outside so he could call his sister, something inside me shifted. The numbness was fading, replaced by something harder, sharper. Not just grief, not just betrayal, a slow, burning determination. They thought they had stripped me of everything. They were wrong. I still had my mind, my will, and now, unexpectedly, an ally. They had underestimated me. It would not be the last time. Rodrigo's sister's apartment was on the third floor of a modest building in a part of the city I had rarely set foot in. The place was tiny, barely 600 square feet, with a kitchenette, a cramped living area, a small bathroom, and a single bedroom. The furniture didn't match. The carpet was worn thin in places, but it was spotless. And right now, it was all I had. It's just temporary, Maria, Rodrigo's sister, told me as she pressed the keys into my palm. Until you figure things out. Figure things out, as if my life hadn't just been smashed into unrecognizable pieces, as if this were a business problem, something that could be solved with a clever plan and a few well-placed phone calls. Thank you, I said, forcing a smile I didn't feel. I appreciate your kindness. When she left, I sat down on the sagging twin bed and let the dam break. The sobs tore out of me from somewhere deep and ancient, shaking my entire body. Tears ran hot down my cheeks, my throat raw from the force of it. I cried until my eyes were swollen, until there was nothing left but a hollow, aching exhaustion. For 3 days, I barely moved from that bed. I ignored my phone. I didn't eat. I just stared at the faint water stain on the ceiling, letting my mind replay every memory of Rosanna, searching for the moment I should have seen it coming. Had she always been capable of this? Had Thomas revealed something that was there all along, or had he reshaped her into someone I no longer recognized? The Rosanna I thought I knew had been kind, ambitious, sometimes self-centered, yes, like many young people, but never cruel, never calculated. On the 4th day, a knock at the door pulled me out of my stupor. I thought about ignoring it, but the sound grew louder, more insistent. Nomi, it's Judith from 10B. Rodrigo told me where to find you. Judith Miller, my neighbor from 2 floors down. We'd never been close of friends, but we'd exchanged pleasantries in the elevator, shared small talk in the lobby. I'd carried her groceries once when her arthritis flared up. She'd watered my plants while I was away. I opened the door, suddenly aware of my unwashed hair, my wrinkled clothes. Her face softened instantly. Oh, honey, she said, her voice heavy with concern. Look at you. Before I could say a single word, she swept right past me into the apartment, the door still swinging behind her. Her arms were crammed with grocery bags, the thin plastic stretching dangerously at the handles. You need to eat, she announced without preamble, heading straight for the tiny kitchenette as if she lived here. And you need a shower. No offense, but you look awful. Her bluntness was strangely comforting. It wasn't pity. It wasn't the syrupy tone people use when they don't know what else to say. It was pure, practical concern, the kind that didn't expect thanks. I'm fine, I said automatically, the words rolling out by habit more than truth. Judith let out a short, sharp snort as she began unloading items from the bags. You're about as far from fine as anyone I've seen in 72 years. She thrust a bottle of water into my hand with the authority of a nurse. Drink, then shower. I'm making soup. I didn't even have the energy to argue. My body felt like it had been wrung out and hung to dry. So I obeyed, letting the water soothe my dry throat before dragging myself to the bathroom. The hot water was a blessing. It pounded over my shoulders, washing away a layer of fog from my mind. By the time I stepped out, wrapped in a towel and dressed in clean clothes from my suitcase, the apartment was filled with the scent of chicken soup and fresh bread. It was the kind of smell that made you remember being cared for. "Sit," Judith ordered, ladling the golden broth into a chipped bowl. I sat. I ate. And only then did I realize how hungry I actually was. The soup was simple: chicken, carrots, onions, but I devoured it. We didn't speak until my bowl was scraped clean. Without a word, she filled it again. "Rodrigo told me what happened," she said at last, her voice level. "Some of it, anyway." I stared into the soup, my reflection rippling in the surface. My granddaughter stole everything from me. My home, my possessions, my dignity. Speaking the words aloud made them sound even more unreal, as if they belonged to someone else's nightmare. Judith nodded slowly. "My son did something similar to me 5 years ago." My head jerked up. "What?" "Not as dramatic as your situation," she clarified, "but he convinced me I wasn't safe living alone anymore. Said I should sign my condo over to him for estate planning purposes. Next thing I knew, I was in an assisted living facility, nothing more than a glorified storage unit for old people. He took my car, my jewelry, my freedom." "What did you do?" I asked, suddenly desperate to know. "Fought back," she said simply. "Found a lawyer who specializes in elder abuse. Got my condo back. Haven't spoken to my son since." "Elder abuse," I repeated, the phrase tasting bitter on my tongue. "Is that what this is?" "What would you call it?" Judith asked gently, but there was steel under her words. I'd never thought of myself as elderly. 67 was just a number. In my mind, I was still the woman who built a business from the ground up, raised a child while juggling clients and impossible deadlines. Someone people relied on, not someone who could be stripped bare and exploited. "I don't know what to do," I admitted, my voice quieter than I meant it to be, "or where to even start." "You start by not letting them destroy you," Judith said firmly, her gaze locking onto mine. "That's what they want, for you to give up, to vanish quietly." Her words hit hard. Wasn't that exactly what I'd been doing these past few days? Hiding? Letting it happen? "I need to check my accounts," I said suddenly, reaching for my phone. "See what else they've taken." "That's the spirit," Judith said, nodding with approval. "And while you do that, I've got something else to show you." She dug into her bag, pulling out a tablet. With a few quick taps, a browser window opened. "Look what your granddaughter's been up to." On the screen was a listing from a high-end online marketplace. My breath caught. It was my mother's antique silver tea service, the one that had been passed down through 3 generations of women in my family. The title read, "Vintage Sterling Silver Tea Set, Family Heirloom." "She's selling my things," I whispered. My fingers scrolled, almost without thinking, uncovering more listings. My rare first edition books, the Persian rug from my living room, even designer clothes I'd spent decades collecting. "Not for long," Judith said grimly. "I've been taking screenshots for evidence." For the first time since I'd read that cruel note, something other than despair stirred inside me. It was small but fierce, a spark of fury. "I need my laptop," I said, pushing back from the table, "and my phone charger, and paper. I need to start making lists." Judith's lips curved into a smile. "Now that sounds like a woman with a plan." "Not a plan," I corrected, taking a deep breath. "Not yet, but I'm not going to disappear. I'm not going to make this easy for them." As my phone began charging, I sifted through missed calls and messages. Most were from unfamiliar numbers. Creditors, no doubt, chasing payment on accounts Rosanna had opened in my name. But one name stopped me cold. Margaret Chen, my attorney. I played her voicemail. "Nomi, I've received some concerning paperwork supposedly authorized by you. Please call me as soon as possible." Relief surged through me. Margaret had noticed. Something wasn't right, and she knew it. I wasn't entirely alone. "I'll call her tomorrow," I told Judith. "First thing," she agreed, gathering her things. At the door, she turned back. "Remember, Nomi, you're not the first person this has happened to, and you're stronger than you think." When she was gone, I stood in the middle of the tiny apartment, taking in my new reality. A borrowed space, a suitcase of clothes, a folder of forged documents. It wasn't much, but it was a place to begin. For now, that would have to be enough. I had always believed that shame kept people silent, especially when the betrayal came from within their own family. But sitting there in Margaret's office, sunlight spilling in through the tall windows that framed the downtown skyline, I knew this wasn't about shame. I'd known Margaret for 15 years, ever since my business began to grow and I needed someone I could trust. She'd managed everything for me over the years: contracts, taxes, my will. The same will that made it absolutely clear that Rosanna was to inherit everything. "I'm not embarrassed," I told her. My voice was steady, but there was heat in it. "I'm furious." Margaret nodded and laid a stack of papers on the desk between us. The forged documents looked unsettlingly official under the bright office light. "As you should be me," she said. "These are high-level forgeries, but they wouldn't survive under the eye of an expert." She tapped one of the papers, a power of attorney form. "For one thing, I know you would never sign something like this without running it by me first. That's how I know we can get everything back. Your apartment, your belongings." Her tone shifted, becoming cautious. "But it's complicated. We could file for an emergency injunction to stop the sale of any more of your assets. The forgery itself would require police involvement, but you need to understand, these cases can drag on. Months, sometimes years." "I don't have years," I said quietly. "I don't even have months. Right now, I'm living in a borrowed apartment with nothing but a suitcase." "I understand." She leaned forward, her eyes holding mine. "But you need to be realistic about how slow this process can be. Even when you have strong evidence, the courts are not fast." She hesitated. "And there's also your relationship with Rosanna to consider." "What relationship?" The words came out, bitter. "She's made it very clear where we stand." "She's still your granddaughter," Margaret reminded me gently. "If you go forward, you have to be prepared for what it means: potential criminal charges against her, a break you may never be able to mend." I turned toward the window, the city outside blurring as my mind drifted. Despite everything, a part of me still reached for the Rosanna I used to know, the little girl who would come running into my arms after a nightmare, the teenager who patiently taught me how to use social media, the young woman who walked across her college graduation stage with honors, making my chest swell with pride. But maybe that girl was gone. Maybe she had never truly been there at all. "I need to be practical," I said at last. "I need somewhere to live, money to survive on. If the legal route is going to take too long, what other options do I have?" Margaret thought for a moment. "There might be another angle. You told me your apartment had several valuable antiques and collectibles." I nodded. "Mostly family heirlooms, some worth quite a lot." "And you have proof of ownership? Insurance papers, appraisals, photographs?" "Yes, everything's in my safe deposit box. As far as I know, they haven't gotten to that yet." A small, satisfied smile crossed her face. "Good. Here's what I'm thinking. Instead of fighting for everything at once, we focus on a handful of specific items, ones with rock-solid documentation, and that are distinctive enough to be hard to sell discreetly. And then we negotiate, offer to drop any criminal charges in exchange for a settlement." I frowned. "So, just let them get away with it?" "No," Margaret said firmly. "I want you to get back on your feet as fast as possible. Sometimes the best revenge is living well." I wasn't sure I agreed, but I couldn't deny her plan made sense. For the next hour, we outlined our approach. She would file the initial paperwork and reach out to Rosanna through official channels. I would focus on stabilizing my finances. By the time I left her office, I had a plan. My phone buzzed as I stepped into the hallway. It was a text from Judith. "Need anything from the store? Coming your way." My throat tightened. Just a week ago, I wouldn't have thought of Judith as a friend. Now she felt like a lifeline. "Just company," I typed back. Within the hour, we were at my small kitchen table, scribbling lists. That morning, I had logged into my bank accounts and confirmed what I already suspected. Most of my liquid funds were gone. The only untouched assets were my retirement accounts and my business holdings. "First priority is income," I said aloud, thinking through the problem. "I need to contact my clients. Let them know I'm dealing with some personal challenges." "What exactly is your business?" Judith asked. "Management consulting. I help companies streamline operations and boost efficiency." I smiled faintly, a little ironic given my personal life right now. Could you work from here? She glanced around the cramped apartment. For consultations, yes. The rest I can do remotely, but I'd need a real desk just up. Judith nodded decisively. My nephew works at an office supply warehouse. He can get us a discount on a desk and chair. Us? I raised an eyebrow. Figure of speech, she said with a wave of her hand. Point is, we'll get you set up. By the end of the day, I had a concrete to-do list. Reach out to key clients, set up a temporary home office, open new bank accounts, secure what was left of my assets. Small steps, but they were mine to take. That night, exhaustion finally claimed me. For the first time since my world had been turned upside down, I slept deeply, without dreams. The next morning, I woke to find an email from Margaret had already sent the preliminary notice to Rosanna. A warning, essentially. We both knew to expect pushback, and we both knew we'd have to stand our ground. I'd barely begun to process what that meant when my phone started ringing. Rosanna's number flashed across the screen. My hand hovered there, unsure. Don't answer, Judith called from the kitchenette where she was fussing with the coffee maker. She'd spent the night here again, claiming my sofa was more comfortable than her bed at home. I didn't believe that for a second. She was watching me, making sure I wasn't left alone with my thoughts for too long. I need to know what she's going to say, I told her. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Against Judith's warning, I accepted the call and set it to speaker. Rosanna's voice came through, hesitant, almost fragile, such a sharp contrast from the cold dismissal she'd thrown at me just days earlier. Yes, I said, my tone deliberately flat. I just got this crazy letter from your lawyer, she began, forcing a little laugh that was meant to be disarming. Something about fraud and stolen property? This must be a misunderstanding. What's going on? The audacity nearly stole the breath from my lungs. I think you know exactly what's going on, Rosanna. Is this about the apartment? She asked quickly. Look, I know we moved fast, but you've always said it would be mine one day. We just made it official a little sooner. Yes, I said, by forging my signature, by draining my bank accounts, by selling my belongings online. I kept my voice level, though my hands trembled slightly. A pause. Then her tone shifted, hardening into something colder. Thomas says we don't need to have this conversation. Our lawyers will handle it. Is that what Thomas says? I asked. A strange, sudden clarity washed over me. And what do you say, Rosanna? Is this really who you want to be? Don't try to manipulate me, she snapped. You're just upset because, for once, I'm putting myself first. Is that what you call this? Standing on your own? I asked quietly. You've stolen from me. You've broken the law. That's not independence, Rosanna. That's a crime. Another silence, this one longer. We have documentation for everything, she said at last. But there was a tiny fracture in her voice, a hint of doubt. Forged documentation, I replied. Do you really want to test that in court? She didn't answer right away. I could hear Thomas in the background, though his words were muffled. Rosanna's voice came through faintly. I'm handling it. When she returned to me, her tone had shifted again, this time to something carefully professional, even rehearsed. I think we can both agree it's best to avoid unnecessary ugliness, she said. Why don't we meet and discuss this reasonably? Across the room, Judith caught my eye and shook her head in warning. Any discussion will happen with our attorneys present, I said, my voice firm. Fine, Rosanna replied after a beat. Have your lawyer contact ours. The line went dead. I stared at the phone for a moment, feeling the quiet settle around me. She's scared, Judith observed, setting a steaming mug of coffee beside me. Maybe, I said, or she's just recalculating. Later that afternoon, I was at the small folding card table that currently passed for my desk, setting up my new laptop. That's when a text arrived from an unknown number. This is Thomas. You're making a mistake. Back off now, or we'll make sure everyone hears about your memory problems. Who do you think people will believe? A confused old woman or her concerned granddaughter? Think carefully. I read it twice before handing my phone to Judith, who had appointed herself my unofficial assistant. She'd been sorting receipts, helping me catalog every item that had been taken. Charming fellow, she said dryly. You're keeping that, I assume? Oh, absolutely. I forwarded the message straight to Margaret. Every threat they send only makes our case stronger. For the first time in a long while, I felt the faint stirrings of hope. My home might be gone, but my mind wasn't. My fight wasn't. And now I had a plan. The cafe was my choice. Neutral territory, public enough to keep tempers in check, and exactly halfway between my temporary apartment and what used to be my home. I arrived 20 minutes early, choosing a corner table where I could watch both entrances. I ordered tea but didn't touch it. Margaret joined me, elegant in a charcoal gray suit, her leather portfolio neatly arranged in front of her. "Remember," she murmured, "we're not here to negotiate everything. Only the items we can prove, without question, belong to you." I nodded, my eyes never leaving the door. It had been a week since Rosanna's phone call, 7 days filled with careful preparation. I'd secured every remaining asset, reconnected with my most important clients, and even completed a small consulting job via video call. That routine had been more than just a distraction. It reminded me that while they had taken a great deal from me, they had not taken my mind. They had not taken my skills. "There they are," Margaret said quietly. Rosanna came in first, scanning the cafe before her gaze landed on me. She was wearing a cream-colored dress, one I had bought her for her college graduation. Her hair was pulled back sharply, almost severe. Thomas followed, wearing an expensive suit that looked strange on him, too polished for the smug expression he always wore. Behind them walked a man in his 50s with a briefcase, undoubtedly their attorney. As they approached, I studied my granddaughter's face, searching for something. Remorse, guilt, even anger. But what I found was worse, a blankness, a mask I had never seen her wear before. "Gran," she said, her voice unreadable. Her voice was professionally cordial as she approached the table, as if this were nothing more than a formal meeting between strangers. No kiss on the cheek, no real acknowledgement of the relationship we once had. Just business, two parties on opposite sides. "Rosanna," I greeted her with the same deliberate formality. We exchanged introductions. Her lawyer turned out to be Alan Peterson, a divorce attorney, of all things. He looked faintly uneasy, as though this situation didn't sit comfortably with him. A divorce lawyer, I thought, not a fraud specialist, not a criminal defense attorney, someone used to splitting up marital assets. That was interesting. "Let's get straight to business," Thomas said, his tone clipped with impatience. "We've reviewed your claims," he drew out that last word in a way that made it sound absurd, "and we're prepared to offer a settlement." Margaret raised a single eyebrow. "I don't believe we've even presented our demands yet." "We're being proactive," Peterson inserted smoothly, his voice like silk. "Ms. Fisher has certain items to which she feels emotionally attached. We're willing to return some of them as a gesture of goodwill." "Some of them?" I repeated slowly. "My own possessions?" Rosanna shifted in her chair, her composure beginning to fray. "The apartment was in the process of being transferred to me anyway," she said. "You told me so yourself many times." "The process," I corrected, meeting her gaze directly. "With proper legal documentation. Not through forged signatures." Thomas leaned forward, his voice low. "Allegedly forged. Your memory hasn't been the best lately, has it now?" Margaret laid a calming hand on my arm before sliding a folder across the table. Inside was a comprehensive list. Every disputed item backed by indisputable proof. Bank statements, insurance documents, provenance certificates, photographs with timestamps spanning decades. Peterson's brow furrowed deeper with every page he scanned. He bent toward Rosanna, whispering something that made her polished facade crack for the first time. A flash of worry crossed her face. "We've also documented the online sales of several of these items," Margaret went on, handing over a stack of printed listings that Judith had been tracking. "The pearl necklace that belonged to Mrs. Fisher's mother. The first edition, Hemingway. The Persian rug appraised at $22,000. Thomas gave a scoffing laugh. "Rosanna's grandmother gave her those things." "Did she?" Margaret asked mildly. "Then she won't mind explaining that to the police. We've already filed a preliminary report." The word police hit the table like a stone dropped into still water, sending out invisible ripples of tension. Rosanna's face drained of color. Thomas's jaw tightened. Even Peterson looked distinctly uncomfortable. This is unnecessary, Rosanna said, her voice pitched just a little too high. We can resolve this as a family. The sheer audacity of that nearly stole my breath. A family, I repeated. Is that what we are, Rosanna, after what you've done? For the first time, she couldn't meet my eyes. You don't understand. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. Then explain it to me, I said, leaning forward. Help me understand how my granddaughter, whom I raised, whom I loved with everything I had, could do this to me. This is unproductive, Thomas cut in sharply. We're here to discuss terms, not feelings. But the mask Rosanna had so carefully constructed was already cracking. You were going to sell the apartment, she blurted out. Thomas saw the emails from the real estate agent. I blinked. What emails? On your laptop, she said. About downsizing, selling the apartment, moving to that retirement community in Arizona. The realization came to me slowly, piece by piece. Rosanna, I was researching those options for Judith's mother, as a favor. I have never considered selling our home. Doubt flickered in her expression. But Thomas said what you needed to hear, I finished quietly, to justify what you were already doing. Thomas's face had gone rigid. This is ridiculous. We're leaving. He pushed back his chair, but Margaret's voice stopped him cold. Sit down, Mr. Harris. Her tone was pleasant but edged with steel. Unless you'd prefer to explain yourself to the detective who's waiting for my call. She tapped her phone with deliberate emphasis. Slowly, reluctantly, he lowered himself back into his seat. Peterson cleared his throat. Perhaps we should discuss the specific terms of an agreement. First, I said, holding Rosanna's gaze, I want the truth. All of it. Silence stretched between us, taut as a pulled wire. Then, almost imperceptibly, Rosanna nodded. It started 6 months ago, she began, her voice halting. When Thomas and I got engaged, Thomas shifted as if to cut her off, but Peterson stopped him with a look. We wanted to buy a house, but we couldn't afford the down payment, Rosanna continued. Thomas suggested borrowing from you, but I knew you'd ask questions about his finances, about his business ventures that never seemed to work out. My heart sank. So that was money. The most ordinary, unremarkable motive there is. And yet, that's what it all came down to in the end. Then he found those emails, plans about selling off properties, talk of retirement communities. He convinced me you were preparing to leave, to start over somewhere far away, and that everything I'd assumed I would one day inherit would vanish before it could ever reach me. Her voice trembled as she went on. He told me we should just take what was meant for me anyway, before you had the chance to change your mind. I turned my gaze toward Thomas, really seeing him clearly now. Not some criminal mastermind, but an opportunist, a man who had found a weak spot in my granddaughter and pressed on it without mercy. And the forgeries? I asked. Rosanna's eyes began to glisten. Thomas knew someone. She trailed off, and Peterson winced like the words themselves hurt. So you stripped my home bare, I said quietly, sold off my belongings, left me with nothing but a note. The tears finally spilled over. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't think. I never thought. That's right, I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. You didn't think about me at all. 1 year later, I stood in my new kitchen. Morning sunlight poured through windows that looked out, not onto the noisy gray of a city street, but over a small green garden. The smell of freshly brewed coffee curled warmly through the air as I arranged an assortment of pastries on a tray. Judith would be here any minute for our weekly breakfast. Life moved differently now, slower, yes, but with a rhythm that felt deliberate and solid beneath my feet. The legal settlement had been finalized 6 months earlier. In the end, I hadn't gotten everything back. Some things had been sold too far out of reach, and the old apartment carried too much pain for me to ever reclaim it. Instead, I had accepted financial compensation, along with the return of my most precious possessions. My mother's jewelry, the family photographs, personal papers, and a handful of antiques that carried memories worth keeping. The rest, I let go. With the settlement money and my retirement savings, I bought this modest house in a quiet neighborhood. 2 bedrooms, a study for the consulting work I still took on, and finally, a garden I could tend at my own pace. Not extravagant, but it was wholly mine, untouched, safe. The doorbell rang, and I smiled at the familiar lilt of Judith's voice calling through the mail slot. It better be those almond croissants in there. Know me. I opened the door to find her holding a pot of violets, her latest attempt to add more color to my garden. Happy house anniversary, she declared. 1 year in your fortress of solitude. Hardly solitary with you barging in 3 times a week, I teased, accepting the plant. We settled at the kitchen table, slipping easily into our comfortable ritual: coffee, pastries, and conversation. Judith had become something more than just a neighbor or even a friend. She was family now, the kind you choose, not the kind you're born into. Any word? She asked casually, though we both knew exactly what she meant. I nodded. Another letter came yesterday. For months now, Rosanna had been writing to me. At first, just hesitant little notes of apology, then longer letters about her life, her struggles, the steps she was taking to repair what she'd broken. She'd ended her engagement to Thomas soon after the settlement, moved to another state, started therapy, found a job. Small steps, but they were hers to take. I hadn't replied to any of them. Not yet, I said. Are you going to respond this time? Judith asked. I took a slow sip of coffee, weighing my words. I'm thinking about it. The doorbell rang again, cutting through the moment. I wasn't expecting anyone else. For a heartbeat, old fears stirred, the memory of Thomas's threats, the ones that had lingered even after the settlement, until the restraining order finally silenced him. I'll get it, Judith said, rising before I could protest. I heard the low murmur of voices in the hallway. Then Judith came back, her expression unreadable. It's Rosanna. My heartbeat stumbled. She's here now? Judith nodded. Want me to send her away? I drew a deep breath, steadying myself. No, I'll see her. Rosanna stood in the doorway, hesitant, carrying a face that was both achingly familiar and strangely altered. Her hair was shorter now, her clothes simpler than the designer outfits she used to wear without a second thought. In her hands, she clutched a small package wrapped in plain brown paper. Gran, she said softly, I'm sorry for showing up like this. I was just going to leave this on the porch, but... Come in, I said, surprised at how even my voice sounded. Judith gave my shoulder a quick squeeze. I'll be in the garden if you need me, she murmured, slipping past Rosanna with a watchful glance. Rosanna and I sat across from each other at the kitchen table. The silence between us weighted and still. She placed the package on the table but didn't slide it toward me. Your house is beautiful, she said at last. It suits you. Thank you, I replied, nodding toward the package. What's this? Her fingers trembled as she pushed it slowly toward me. Something I found after everything. It had fallen behind a drawer in the apartment. I began unwrapping the brown paper with care. Inside was a small, leather-bound book. The moment I saw it, I knew exactly what it was. The moment I saw it, my breath caught. My grandmother's recipe journal, the one filled with handwritten notes, flour-stained pages, and bits of cooking wisdom passed down through 3 generations, sat in front of me. For years I had believed it was gone forever, lost to time and circumstance. I remembered how much it meant to you, Rosanna said, watching my face closely, almost as if she were measuring my reaction against the memories she carried. How you used to read it to me when I was little, telling me stories about great-grandma Eliza. I swallowed hard, my throat tightening as I gently opened the worn cover. Between 2 pages, something fluttered slightly, a piece of paper pressed flat for decades. It was a crayon drawing, the colors faint but still visible. 2 stick figures labeled me and Gran, standing proudly beside what looked like a cake. You kept this, I murmured, more surprised than I expected to be. It was our first recipe together, Rosanna replied softly. My 7th birthday. Chocolate cake with raspberry filling. The memory rose up so vividly it was almost tangible. Flour dusting the tip of her small nose. The way she leaned over the counter with serious concentration, carefully leveling a cup of sugar. The glow in her eyes when we finally pulled the cake from the oven. Perfect and fragrant. That had been just months after her mother died. One of the first times I had seen her smile again. I closed the journal slowly as though sealing the moment inside. Why are you here, Rosanna? Really? She met my gaze squarely, something she had not done during the settlement meeting or in any of her carefully worded letters. To see you, she said. To tell you in person how sorry I am. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I needed to say it. She paused, her voice lowering, and to ask if, someday, there might be a way forward. Forward? I repeated. Not back, she said with a small nod. I know we can't go back. I searched her face, expecting to find the calculated charm I'd seen in the cafe a year earlier. Instead, I saw something far more complicated. Real remorse, yes, but also a quiet acceptance, as if she understood she might never be forgiven. She wasn't pleading for absolution, only for recognition of her regret. I've spent a lot of time thinking about what happened, I said finally. Why it happened. I betrayed you, she said simply, her tone stripped of defense. There's no excuse. No, I agreed, there isn't. But there are explanations, things I've come to understand about both of us. I stood and moved to the window, my eyes finding Judith in the yard, tending to her newly planted violets. After your mother died, I poured everything into making sure you had stability, security. I wanted you never to feel the financial uncertainty I grew up with. I turned back to her. But in doing that, maybe I taught you that possessions, money, and status were what mattered most. That's not on you, Gran, she said quickly. That was my choice, my failing maybe. Maybe, I allowed, but I still wonder if I could have done better. Been more present for you emotionally, not just financially. Her eyes shimmered with tears. You were always there when it mattered. Until I wasn't, I said quietly. When you needed guidance about Thomas, about your future. She shook her head. I didn't want guidance then. I wanted what I wanted. Consequences be damned. I returned to the table, the recipe journal still in my hands. I'm not ready to forgive completely, I told her honestly. Maybe I never will, but I'm not interested in holding on to bitterness either. Her brows lifted slightly. What does that mean? She asked, her expression a delicate balance of hope and caution. It means I'll answer your next letter, I said, and we'll see where that leads. It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation, not even a promise, just a small shift. A crack in a door I had thought permanently sealed. Rosanna nodded slowly, accepting the gesture for what it was, modest but meaningful. I should go, she said, rising to her feet. Thank you for seeing me. At the doorway, she hesitated. Your friend Judith, she's protective of you. Yes, I agreed. That's what real family does. When she was gone, Judith stepped back into the kitchen, her eyes immediately finding the journal on the table. Well, she asked. Small steps, I said. Her mouth curved into a knowing smile. Good. Small steps are the ones you can keep. Later that evening, after Judith had gone home, I sat in my garden watching as the sunset bled across the sky in strokes of pink and gold. My new life wasn't perfect. Parts of it still felt raw, still tender, but it was mine, rebuilt from the ground up, and in some ways stronger because it had once been broken. I opened my grandmother's journal again, flipping to a blank page at the back. This time I didn't write recipes. I wrote about loss and recovery, about the family we choose, about the slow, painstaking work of piecing a life together again. The house behind me was smaller than my old apartment. My circle of people had once shrunk almost to nothing, but now it was growing again, in new directions. My relationship with Rosanna, if it ever truly healed, would not resemble what it had been before. It would be more deliberate, more cautious, more aware. As the daylight faded and my pen moved across the page, I realized something. This life I had now, this reconstructed existence, wasn't a watered-down version of what I'd lost. It wasn't lesser, it was simply different, more intentional, more honest. And for now, that was enough.